Oh, hello there in television land. I'm Otto Penzler, and I'm in my office at the Mysterious Bookshop in downtown Manhattan. And today we're going to talk about collecting one of the most unusual detectives in all of mystery fiction. He's a character created by Arthur Upfield, and his name is Napoleon Bonaparte. He got his name when he was discovered as a little baby and he'd been abandoned, and was taken to a missionary home of some kind, and at the age of 2 weeks. And very soon after, he started chewing on a gigantic biography of Napoleon, and as a result, the people at the missionary called him Napoleon. He preferred to be called Boney. He asked all his friends to call him Boney, and that's how he's mostly referred to in the novels. He is half Aboriginal, Australian character, obviously, and his mother was an Aboriginal, and his father was unknown white guy, so he's a half caste, known as a half caste in the stories. And fascinating character because he's brilliant, and but in addition to being a great intellectual, he is also works in the bush and is able to track people, much like Native Americans are famous for doing in the United States. He's famous for doing that in Australia. He was born in England, but moved to he kept failing at everything, and his father just got so upset with him and so angry, he sent him to Australia at the age of 19, where he worked at doing all kinds of things like cow handler and so on, and then finally started to write. And he was published in Australia first, and then in England, and then in the United States. And the series, you really have to pay attention if you are somebody who wants to collect the true first, because in many cases it's the American edition is the true first, in some cases the British is the true first, and in some cases the Australian is the true first. So you have to pay attention to that. The early books are incredibly rare. It's almost impossible to find first editions in the dust jacket. I have quite a few of the early books, Winds of Evil, for example, and it's pretty expensive. It's $125, even without a dust jacket. This is published by Angus and Robertson in 1937 in Australia. It was reprinted later in England and in the United States. Mr. Jelly's Business, if memory serves, I think this is the first, no, it's not. I was going to say, I think this is his first book, but it's an early book. Again, it's also 1937, also published by Angus and Robertson. And again, in a very, very expensive, well, that one's not, because it's not a very nice copy. It's $75, and this one's better. This is $125. Again, the same. Also a first edition, just like the other Angus and Robertson books. They're pretty easy to tell. The copyright page has no additional information unless it's a reprint. It'll say second printing or third printing, but I don't think there were second and third printings. These books were done in such small quantities, which is why they're so uncommon now. Bushranger of the Skies is another early book. This is 1940. And again, Angus and Robertson was his publisher in Australia. Again, no dust jacket because they're so rare. I normally am not crazy about having first editions without dust jackets, especially once they get expensive. This is Wings of the Diamanta, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, 1936. And this might be his first book. My memory is just is failing me right now. I should have memorized his entire chronology before I started the show, but I just didn't. I'm sorry. So the American editions came out. They were mostly done by the Doubleday Crime Club. The New Shoe, many people call that his greatest book. Other people say Death of a Lake is. This is The Will of the Tribe. And Doubleday Crime Club is the easiest publisher you could possibly want. And here in Dust Jacket, $35. They're very collectible once you get into the later books. And this is 1962. And Doubleday Crime Club is easy. They always say first edition on the copyright page. And a lot of times you'll see a book, I mean, for example, a Queen's Quorum title that was published by the Doubleday Crime Club called The Bellamy Trial. Like every copy that I saw for years and years didn't have that first edition slug, and I thought Doubleday Crime Club must have just forgotten to put it on. Until I found one that said first edition. So you can rely on the Doubleday Crime Club to be pretty much infallible about doing that. His British publisher was Heinemann, and here's a medium, not early but not late, William Heinemann, his British publisher, and they say on the copyright page, first publish, and it'll tell you the date, and if there's a second printing, it'll say second printing. So they're pretty easy to determine. The jackets on the British editions tend to be a little bit more interesting than the American editions. Here's another Heinemann edition, Boney and the Black Virgin, $65, and what's the date on this? Probably mid-50s. Yeah, 59. And again, first published 1959, and no subsequent printings. Now, some of these books, and there are many more, they're really good jackets. The American jackets tend to be two-color, whereas the British are a lot more dazzling. Now, again, as I was saying, some of those early books are so incredibly rare that the possibility of trying to find those books and holding out for dust jackets will leave you disappointed. It's almost impossible to think that you could put together a complete run of Arthur Upfield in first editions in dust jacket. So what happened is there was a publisher who moved around a lot named Dennis McMillan, who lived in Hawaii, he lived in San Francisco, he lived in New Mexico, he moved around, but he kept publishing books. Many of them were reprints. He did limited editions of people like Michael Connolly, George Pelecanos, James Crumley, and so on. But he also did reprints of Arthur Upfield. They're very handsome books. They were generally limited editions of 500 copies or so, and they're very collected and actually quite expensive because it's the only hope that you can have of finding these some of these very early titles in a dust jacket. There's Gripped by Drought, A Royal Abduction, and The House of Cain. This one has an introduction by Philip Jose Farmer, who autographed not this copy. This copy is $100, but I do have another copy, and that's $125. He's no longer with us. And as a matter of fact, it's very handy. I could just reach out my hand. Oh, and there it is. Look, House of Cain, and there's Philip Jose Farmer's autograph. Perfect, and all these Macmillan books are all in perfect condition. So there's Arthur Upfield, a very challenging guy to collect in first edition.